I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Where are our prophets now? Where are those messages God chooses to communicate divine revelation through? In the past, the Creator has sent prophets like Abraham, Siddhartha, Jesus, Muhammad, and many more. Maybe our higher power has switched tactics since we reinterpret God's words as soon as the Creator's prophets leave us. Could it be that Spirit talks to each one of us individually and we haven't learned to listen? On Words of the Prophets, our modern prophets show us how to find the internal prophet that is the I Am, and we discuss the application of spiritual principles in all aspects of our lives. Love and light, everybody. I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Today my guest is Virginia Ellen. Welcome.
Thank you.
Virginia is a mystical teacher and a healer, and today's prophetic topic is Made Whole Once Again. Today's prophetic topic is the last four words of the Aramaic translation of the Lord's Prayer. The last line that contains our topic reads as follows: For you are the ground and the fruitful vision, the birth and fulfillment, as all is gathered and made whole once again. And we're going to get into the prayer. We're just going to look at the traditional prayer. Not going to favor. I chose to use Matthew instead of Luke. There are some differences, but we don't have to get into those differences. They're not as nearly as significant or as meaningful in differences between the two of them, in my belief, as the one that Virginia is going to be talking about, which is the Aramaic version. But before we even do that, reacquaint our guests, because Virginia's been on here before, reacquaint our guests with who you are and how you got to be doing what you're doing.
Well, I was a seeker just like millions of others, and I had a child that died of cancer early on, and that sort of put me on a path of asking a lot of questions. And then, of course, Spirit always answers. And then...
Where did you come from
I was Catholic.
So how did you deal with that? I mean, did you start to say, like, this isn't working for me, I got to find something different?
Well, you know, I went to the priest when they came out and said this was nothing we can do except keep him comfortable. And so, of course, that's where I went. And the priest I spoke to obviously was old school. And he said to me, it's God's will. And I just about blew it, you know, and was like, well, who's God then? Excuse me. And so all these questions, you know, and I was angry at God, really angry if that was God's will. So I was confused, you know, basically. And that put me on my journey.
Talk about the journey. Where did you go from there? How did you feel about going from there?
Well, I stopped going to church, and I sort of like rebellion, you know. I didn't believe in that God anymore. And so I was seeking, and so I went to a counselor because I was dealing with this emotional process of death. And then she happened to be a spiritual person, metaphysical, and I had never heard of metaphysics. I was mainstream 100%. So she started feeding me books to read, you know, channeled books and all kinds of spiritual books. And I was so intrigued by these books, I just couldn't read enough. And then she invited me to go to the S training, which was Werner Erhard's training. And I did that. And then I found people there that were going to the Center for Spiritual Living. So I went there. And so it was this progress of, you know, learning more, doing workshops and everything, just all this stuff. And then about 10 years later, Jesus appeared to me. And
in a dream? Or
no, I was actually having an energy session. And it was my first energy session that I'd ever had. And he suddenly appeared and said it was time to lay down the cross. And I didn't answer because I was sort of stunned, you know, and he was so luminous and his words just sort of penetrated into me, but I didn't really understand what he was talking about. And then about a week later, I got very ill and had what I call a spiritual purge that ended up into a near-death experience. So it lasted about 3 days, and on the third day, I felt some very weird sensation in my body, and I said, I'm dying. Like there was a sense of knowing that I was dying. And then the next thought was, oh good, it's over. So that tells you how happy I was. And so I suddenly felt myself leaving, and I had absolutely no resistance to leaving. I had nothing to hold on to that I wanted to hold on to, so I just very easily left my body, and I began to move in this most beautiful, peaceful, blissful, amazing energy that I'd never experienced before. And it just kind of took me, and I knew I was traveling, moving, and then suddenly I saw this light, and there was Jesus, as I kept getting closer to the light. And then he basically showed me my life, and showed me that I had always done what I was expected to do. I followed all the rules, and I never did what I really wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted because I was always doing what other people told me to do. So I was really a choiceless being, basically. So I saw all this, and he would show me moments in time when I made these choices to do it the way I was told. And I didn't really go in to see what I wanted. And so I went, oh, well then, now I get it, I can go back, I can do it over. And he said, yeah, you could, but you must agree to change every concept of your life. And I didn't ask any questions. I just said, okay. And I came back, and then he began to appear to me every morning, and when I meditated, and he would teach me how to do this thing called changing every concept of your life. And my work basically has become that, these teachings that he gave me to begin the process of finding me as a divine being, and not what I thought I was or who I thought I was supposed to be, but to really just be me and the authenticness of who I am as a spirit.
Can you remember those first teachings? What were they like?
Well, the first thing he told me was stop praying to a God outside of you and pray to the God within. And so then he taught me how to, begin this process of praying to the 3 channels, which are the caduceus in Egypt, but it's the divine male, which is our consciousness, the divine female, which is our emotional body, and then the main channel, which is the golden light. And then this energy starts moving in your body, and healing begins as it moves through our energy centers. And our frequency then begins to quicken, because you're focusing on the divine in you, and you're loving it. You're in devotion. And then you begin to tell it everything. You bring your problems and your upsets to this divine presence that always moves you into a new place of understanding. So it's very transformational.
Well, you set the intention by believing and doing the work, and that it feeds itself.
Yes, yeah. So your body quickens, and people will have kriyas, which means involuntary movement. So if we have a blockage in our bodies, you'll suddenly be jerking like this, and then your legs might start moving because the quickening's happening. And then your whole body starts shaking, And I'm pretty much finished with that phase, but in the beginning I did a lot of that because the light was breaking up the resistance of my own energy body because I had embraced incorrect concepts.
You got ill, you had a near-death experience, and then the work started.
Yes.
How long has that been happening?
It's been over 20 years.
Is there any indication that when the work ends, does the work end?
I don't think it ever ends. I mean, I'm in a state of being now that I never knew I could be in. I am beginning to realize my divinity, and I am at peace. Things don't trigger me like they used to. I don't react. I stay in peace. I understand what's going on, and so I don't take it personally. So all these things that were not anything part of my life, because I used to take everything personal. and I was always reacting. So now there's a state that's just so amazingly like I can stay in the presence of love regardless of pretty much anything that goes on.
Any indications that you'll be writing a book?
Well, I'm writing a new book, but I have written two. One is Sacred Heart Yoga, which is the practice that he first brought, and it's channeling, you know, like what each phase of this practice does. It develops your spiritual bodies, you know, so everything that's you do is for a purpose of development. So there's channeling, then there's the movements, and there's the prayers, you know, and so that book is all about that.
What about the story?
It's in there. My story's in that book. Yeah.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
because that's that's the not the real power, but that's where I think people get drawn in first to hear the story, to just hear this is the result, this is the practice. How did I get there? That's why I do this with all my guests. It's about connecting, I believe, to that initial confusion, the pain, the grief, and it's like, wait a second, I don't want to be here. No, you got to stay here. You got work to do, girl. You know, that kind of stuff. And I think that to me is the real connecting point for most people. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, so it's been a fascinating life.
Now, you've also talked about having Mary Magdalena as a teacher. How does that intertwine with Jesus? When did that happen?
Okay, well, in 1994, I was leading a retreat in Hawaii on the Big Island, and there were 26 participants. A lot of them were from Canada, and I used to channel every afternoon. We do the practice in the morning, and in the afternoon and evening I would channel Jesus. And so he announced to me as I was walking across the lawn to go to this retreat house that you will not channel. And I said, well, what am I going to do? People came to hear you. They didn't come for me. And he said, lay down and you're ready to teach. Everything will come from within you. And that's when this energy, this activating energy started happening, and all this transformation happened. And everybody, by the end of the week, which was a 7-day retreat, everybody was illuminated by this light moving through them and having all these experiences with their own divinity, talking to them and, you know, healing them and all those things that were happening. And so after that retreat, when I went home, Mary Magdalena came and she said, well, now you have an energy system that's like a computer, but you don't know how to use it. So I've come to teach you to use this new energy that you have available in your body now. And so she gave me what has been named the keys to the sacred seals. And so each seal is a divine chamber of the Holy Spirit. And that's what the Christians call the kingdom of heaven within you. So she began to give me key words that would immediately release light into your body, and movement would start. And, you know, you would be able to manifest from that. You would be able to correct thoughts that you had that were behavior patterns, dictions, whatever. And it all happened inside of you using this holy wisdom, this holy energy that we have called the Holy Spirit.
So let's talk about the yoga and the seals. How did that come about? What does it look like? Without going into a demonstration, we got you wired to the chair. We can't do that.
Okay, well, like I say, you focus on the divine male and you pray to that, and it starts moving this energy, you know, which is a snake, and then the female, and then the male. And when all three channels come together in one moment, that's the activation. Because any three lights that come together, or any three pieces of consciousness that come together in one moment, it's the atomic energy that activates you. So it feels like Old Faithful's going off in your body. All of a sudden, this huge amount of energy just rushes up through you, and it starts clearing you and taking you into blissful experiences.
Is there a particular place that they come together, or does that change?
In each one of these energy centers, which we call chakras, just above it is the seal, and they'll come together in each seal, but not all at once. Over
But it's
time,
also progression.
Yeah, over time they begin to activate, and when the crown activates, your brain begins to awaken and activate, so you have more use of your brain.
So the crown is the seventh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so the glands in our bodies are the spiritual component to the physical body. So when the pituitary begins to activate, that's when enlightenment is now available for that person, because they have access to all infinite knowledge as the brain awakens, as the brain activates the cells, the dormant cells that we didn't know how to awaken, is what happens.
Do you find that you're answering questions at times you didn't know the answer to, but you knew you were answering the right thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's part of that awakening process.
Right, and you just know things,
mm-hmm.
that you never thought you could know. Or maybe you weren't even interested in, but it's something that comes to you. So there's always this download, you might say, of intelligence coming.
At the beginning, do you ever start to question your own sanity?
Oh yes, definitely. When he first started talking to me, I thought, am I going crazy? And so I had a few friends, and so I would tell them, and so one of them was going to a channeling, opening to channel retreat, so I went, and that's where I got confirmation. Because the woman that was leading the retreat could see the spirits behind each person, and she would describe, oh, and this is the being or the beings that you will be bringing through today, this weekend. And so when she came to me, she saw this huge angel that, was, I guess, gigantic. And then she said, oh, and then there's somebody walking towards you, and he's wearing a burgundy robe. And she said, oh, it's Yeshua, which is his name in Aramaic. And I was like, oh, it's real, So then it was like confirmation.
Yeah.
But still, I was, very afraid to bring it to the public, because I just didn't. I was the biggest doubting Thomas you probably could have, and also low self-esteem and not believing in myself.
Well, your whole world got turned upside down.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
That has to be a heck of an experience. So, can there be things that the audience can do that help them further along this path?
Well, living in devotion to, their divinity or to God is really important. So I spend most of my day in prayer and being connected, because faith is connection in Aramaic. So when you are connected, so if I have, like before I came, I said, okay, beloved, help me find the college and exactly where I'm supposed to go. So I'm always talking to the divine presence of intelligence that isn't me as a human, but it is part of me as a divine being. So I stay in contact. And I think that is so important when we get into fear, doubt, confusion, to stay connected, because faith gives you confidence. And if you have the faith, because you're staying connected in conversation, which is prayer, then you start gaining confidence that, oh, something in me will find the way.
Well, to take that, one of the really great sayings from Jesus is the kingdom of God is within.
Mm-hmm.
So if the kingdom of God's within, any communication I have, whether with you or with myself, is a communication with the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just got to acknowledge that and embrace that.
Exactly.
I got to ask this question. At any point, did Jesus ever say something to the effect of, look what they did in my name?
Well, he has mentioned that, he came as a teacher, and that people never followed the teachings, that they just made him an idol, you know, and basically that's what Christianity has done. They don't really go into the Aramaic teachings and what he actually said, but they keep him as this idol. And then, of course, the words in Aramaic were first translated into Greek, and then from there to English. And so there was that movie Lost in Translation. That's kind of what happened.
Bill Murray.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
So, you know, because the Aramaic language is a language of unity, and there was no separation. In other words, they don't separate heaven and earth. It's all one. Mind, body, spirit, it's all one. We are all the Adam, the living spirit in a human body. You know, so then when it went to Greek, they made heaven and earth separate, and we were down here trying to get up there. And so that's when it started getting diluted, and it continued on.
So these teachings were passed on to the apostles, anybody who would listen. Does Jesus talk to you about where this information got lost, how it got changed?
Well, they didn't, you know, most people didn't write
at
that time.
Tradition.
So it was oral transmission. You know, everything was oral. People went to hear prophets because they knew there was an energy being transmitted from this prophet to them. And they would take that in, and then it would be part of their own system. And so the tradition continued in homes where people would get together, and they would have what we call Mass now, or Sunday service, you know, and they would break bread and have Holy Communion. And the women always served the Holy Communion because women baked the bread, men did not go in the kitchen, and they did not serve. And then when Catholicism came in, it was the men that suddenly became the priest, and only they could make this holy and sacred. So there was a lot, you know, of things that got lost. And there were people that continued to practice this mystical path, because it's a very mystical path, because you're experiencing something that is beyond the intellect, or that you can see. You know, I can see the table and I can touch it, but you can't see the invisible energy of spirit, you know, but you can feel it energetically and emotionally, you know, but it's different. So during the Inquisition, that was what that was about. All of the people that had followed these original teachings were mystical and having gifts, which they called, you know, witchcraft.
Yeah.
And they wiped them out because they didn't want anybody to know they were divine and have connection to their true divinity. So they just wiped everybody out that was following a mystical path and named them witches and whatever else they named them.
Well, they were doing that from the very beginning. They did that to the Gnostics.
Yes,
which
exactly.
had that kind of belief you're talking about. Right. And, yeah.
So it's really time for us to have the original teachings and to begin to know that we are part of this whole vast universal energy that he calls Allah, because there wasn't a word for God. Allah was the word he would refer to, which meant the one being, the sacredness of all life, sacred unity, oneness, the all that is, infinite potential, infinite wisdom, you know. And so that was, and we're all part of that. We're all part of the one that's in everything that's living.
Before we get into the Lord's Prayer, just one other quick question. How were you taught Aramaic?
Well, he started coming on my birthday 10 years ago. And
Heck of a present.
Yeah, I know. And he started teaching me the word Allah. And so he would say, close your eyes and relax and just say this word every day for 10 minutes. So I did. And nothing happened in the beginning. And then one day I started crying as I got deeper into it, because my soul was remembering that energy or the word. And suddenly one day, the energy of Allah spoke to me, and it said, what does it say exactly? I am you, you are me, and we are one. We are one and the same. There is no difference between you and me, and you are an essence of the light that I am. And so that was like beginning to teach me that I was part of the whole, you know. And if I embrace that, which I still haven't fully embraced, but I'm...
Why?
Because it's not easy. You know, there's all these belief systems that we have, and I don't work on it like every day, but, you know, I will, you know, go back to that, because embracing means you have to completely become that vibration, so that's all you vibrate is the truth. And there's nothing left in you that is still living in the separation consciousness. So it's a, you know, it's a process. But I am definitely about 90% there, you know. And so I'm in, you know, one with all things. And it's just a beautiful way to look at the sky, you know, and see that we are one with the beautiful clouds, or, you know, the mountains or the rivers or whatever we see in nature, that it's all one and it's all part of this vastness.
I mean, to jump to the other side of the world, what you're describing sounds... We had a show last week, a Zen Buddhist master, and we were talking about the nirvanic meditations, that there was a series of meditations, and you're almost describing them, where we remove ourselves from identifying and connecting with deeper and deeper aspects of self.
Mm-hmm. It's probably the same thing,
Yeah.
just different way of getting there, or different words.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, because all paths are leading to this oneness and this self-realization, you know, of unity.
So let's get into the Lord's Prayer. At what point did you start to get the information that we didn't translate it too well?
Well, when he started teaching me, and I could see that, well, the Bible's full of the word God, and we always talk about God, everybody. And it's like, that wasn't even a word, you know. And so it's like, oh, there's got to be something different here. And so that started opening me up, and then as he gave me these words, and they didn't come right away, so it's, you know, I had to work with them to get an understanding of them. So...
were you given the prayer a word at a time, a sentence at
yes.
a time? How did that look?
A couple of words at a time. And like the first sentence, which we say, Our Father who art in heaven, is Avun Dibashmaya. And so Dibashmaya is heaven, what we translate into heaven. But it means all radiance and all vibration. So everything exists in heaven, because every vibration of anything that we could possibly conceive, and beyond what we can conceive, is existing. He says all of the problems of the world are existing right now in Dibashmaya, in heaven. You know, because it's all radiance, it's all intelligence. So, you know, that was definitely a different understanding of heaven. It wasn't somewhere where I went. It was something that I could embrace, and it could feed me now, and it could teach me, and it's in me when I am connected to the truth.
How do you, I think it's probably redundant, but how do you stay connected to the truth?
I just keep the consciousness of the truth running through me as a prayer, you know, which is an attunement, because you're attuning yourself to the vibration of the truth.
So you're basically, again, taking it from a different perspective. You're just creating a lengthy mantra.
Yeah, it's a mantra. Yeah, he calls them attunements. So you would attune yourself to the frequency of that truth. So if we have a problem, you know, or you don't have an answer for something in your life, you'd say, well, the answer's existing right now in Dibashmaya, you know. So I would just then close my eyes and I'd say, the answer to my problem is already existing. And I open myself to receive the answer.
And the answer's coming from within.
Yeah, it's coming from within, or it can come from the universal mind. All of a sudden you get a thought. I'm sure you've had those. You're driving and all of a sudden you get this amazing understanding about something, or this idea that, you know, just comes in and you feel it like in a little kind of like an electrical thing coming into your brain. And, it's like, oh, so it can come from inside or it can come from without, because it's everywhere and everything.
Do you find that you could have times where, like at the beginning, reality as we see it or feel it go away?
Mm-hmm.
How do you stay centered, oriented in that?
Well, like he says, that you can't change anything from the perspective of what created it. I created this problem from the way I thought and what I felt and what I believed. So I can't solve it from there. So you have to rise above it to this spiritual plane and receive the information, or ask for it, and starts coming, and maybe not in that moment, but it will come. And then matter changes. The situation begins to change because you have risen above it to the spiritual truth that's already existing. And you begin to bring that into your heart and feel it, and then everything changes. So that would be the alchemy of love.
All these are basically the teachings that are in the Gospels in one shape or form or another that are being overlooked.
And what he did in his life.
It was a demonstration of what he taught.
Yeah, so before he would bring a miracle, like changing this water to wine, he would always open and say, Ephata, which means I open and I hold out my hands to receive. So I use that a lot. I open and I hold out my hands to receive what is needed in this moment for me to understand this or to deal with this. So I always open to this universal downpour of divinity and truth and wisdom, and then it would come through him and it would change things.
One of the things I loved, and it's just the subtle way certain things are worded, but it's numerous times. I can't tell you chapters and verses. I'm not that good at it. But Jesus' reaction to certain situations are, you are loved, sin no more. As opposed to sin no more and then we'll love you. Mm-hmm. It's always love, you are loved, sin no more. That when you're loved, you don't have to sin, whereas opposed to, if you stop sinning, we'll love you. No conditions. Mm-hmm. And that sounds exactly what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Just that unconditional love is there. All we have to do is open ourselves up.
Exactly.
So the second.
So let's go back to the first word.
Okay.
And because it's Abun, it means cosmic birther rather than our Father. And one of the other interesting things is whenever he referred to the divine in Aramaic, it was always the divine feminine because it's the creative force of life. So cosmic birther is a very powerful word, and I'm going to break it down. So the A refers to Allaha, this one being that we're all part of. And the BW is birthing. So birthing was something that was used in all of his Beatitudes, many of them. So birthing is that when I have a new feeling in my body, a new idea, and I love it, I give birth to something in my life. So giving birth is a creation.
Yeah.
And then the two O's, it's ABWOO, is spirit, the holy breath. So you breathe with your breath, you breathe into form what you feel and what you think. Now we're doing it all the time, but if we're conscious about what we want to create, then we can use this to breathe in to form, a creation that would be purposeful for lifting humanity, or, purposeful for our lives.
So whatever we are thinking, whatever we are believing, we're creating.
Yeah, and feeling too.
And then it's a matter, yeah, exactly.
And breathing, so we're always doing it anyway.
So now it's a matter of Basically, what purpose does this creation serve?
Yes. Yeah. And then the last letter is N, and N means that it penetrates into matter. So you can change matter by feeling and thinking, and, so things begin to change form because that's what the N is. It penetrates into form and things shift and change, which could be your soul, it could be your physical body.
Or the water to wine.
Yeah, or it could be something in your life
Yeah.
that comes more into harmony with, what you're really truly desiring.
So what we're talking about is really just being given the gifts, the skills, the tools we need, and just understanding that we've got them and how to use them.
Yeah, we've already got them.
So we don't have to earn any of this. We just have to allow ourselves to believe that they're there and that we're worthy of having them.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Ready to go on to the next sentence?
Sure.
You're my guide.
Okay, so the next sentence is soften the ground of my being. So soften is, in Aramaic, he didn't say the meek will inherit the earth, he said the humble. So if you have a soft heart, you're humble. Because if you're humble, you can admit, I made a mistake. You can tell the truth to people because you're humble and you don't have to hide anything. You're not pretending to be something you're not. And so also there was a word called bisha, which meant hard shell or evil eye or evil thought or gossip. And a hard shell would be our walls of protection that we all had in the past and maybe still have some now. And as that softens, it kind of starts cracking the walls of protection, and that's the softening. So I would say if I was dealing with fear or doubt or anger, I would say soften the ground of my fear. Soften the ground of my doubt. And you keep repeating it maybe 3 or 4 times, and suddenly you start feeling the softening in your body. You actually feel a shift in how you hold yourself. Because when you're scared, you're holding yourself tight.
You're tense, yeah.
Yeah. And so if you just say that, you'll start relaxing. It's really a magical prayer. It's very magical because it works really easily.
It's driven by our own belief and divinity.
Yeah.
So how could it not work?
Yeah, so it's perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
And then hallowed be thy name is the next one, and they kept the word hallow in. He said, hallow out a space within me for your presence to abide. So part of the praying was to create space inside of you. So when I'm fearful, there's no space for peace.
To get out of ego.
Yeah.
Get out of self.
Exactly. So I would say again, hallow out a place within my fear for your presence to abide. If fear was my issue, if anger or blaming or, we get into our ego, and that's what the ego's always doing, judging, hollow out a place within my judging my brothers for your presence to abide,
And if we're all one, when I'm judging you, I'm judging me.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. So that's hallowed be thy name, is to hollow out a space within me for your presence to abide, for peace, love, joy, light, whatever, all of it. So that's, those 3 lines are part of what I call the transformational aspect of the prayer, because I'm being humble, I'm admitting that I have something going on, and I'm asking it to be softened, I'm asking it to be hollowed out. And so then I have more space. And then I would come to the next sentence, which is, bring me, it's in Aramaic, it's tete mokata. And so that's bring me, it's come, is tete, come, my queendom. Come, my queendom. So it's your heart, and in your heart is your sacred heart is the doorway to higher intelligence. And it can bring you, like I have a situation, maybe I have an argument with somebody at work and I don't know how to deal with it, then I would say, bring me, how about my upset with so-and-so? And then I would ask, bring me a new way to communicate to them.
So we're setting a tone. We start off with identifying the source.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're saying, I have to soften first before I can hollow out.
Yes.
So we have a progression. And now that we've gotten this space, I was going to say vacuum, but space, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's telling us now, here's what we do with it. Here's how we fill it.
Yeah, so then from within you comes the divine idea of a new way of handling this situation, or maybe it's for marketing, bring me the ideas to create my vision, And the other thing about this prayer is there's no ego, so then it says, so that I may be empowered to bear the fruit of your love. So if you bring me a new vision on how to deal with this person that I've been upset with, I will be able to be empowered to bear the fruit of your love. So I'm asking for the divine then to express through me, as me, when I talk to this person.
Which goes right back to the first sentence about the being humble. It's not me.
Yes.
It's us.
Right, yeah.
So it's all emanating from that oneness concept.
Yeah, and from this inner kingdom that already has the answers.
And that was Jesus' statement, what you do to the least of me, you do unto me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, let's see, I also like this one. I get out of the way and I let each of my actions bear fruit in accordance with your desire and will. And so this is the one about, what is it in English again, in the English?
You were talking about the give us this day our daily
about
bread?
About God's will. Let thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Yeah.
Okay, so I get out of the way and I let each of my actions bear fruit in accordance to your desire and will. So when I have to make a decision, I say this 2 or 3 times, and then I say, is it your desire and will for me to do this? And I get a very clear answer. So that is God's will. So I'm getting out of the way with my mental mind or my ego, and I am letting, my intention is that each of my actions would bear the fruit of your desire and will. And then if I have a question about, is this the right choice, I ask it, and I always get the correct answer. So I'm off the hook. I don't have to think anymore.
Does, in any of these teachings from Jesus, I want to call it he, but I'll say it, because if it's all one, then there's no masculine, there's no feminine.
Right.
So then the Jesus and the Mary are just being presented to you as a means of relating to different aspects of what is to come, but not as a separation.
Yeah, they're because we are, we have the mental and the emotional components to our being, and God is love, so that's emotion, and God is intelligence, so that's the consciousness.
So in these teachings, does either Jesus or Mary talk about why was the ego ever created?
No, I've never asked that actually, why the ego was created. But I know that we as we know, when we come into form, we forget that we came from this higher realm of consciousness, and we like the veil of forgetfulness comes, and it's time for us to awaken now and to realize who we are, and that's what we're calling ascension. That we'll come back to this oneness. And I don't know why it all started, like what caused us to fall from grace in the beginning. I know there's the Adam and Eve story, but I don't believe that. So, so there's something more, but I haven't specifically asked that, and that would be a very good question to ask.
Let's do a show on it. Ask the there's a lot of cosmology out there. that explains a variety of different things.
Yeah, I've heard many stories about, other people saying what it means, channeling and so forth.
Yeah, and not only channeling, I mean, well, yeah, it's all in one sense or another channeling. I mean, my own, I'm not going to get into it at all, just to say that the explanation I believe in was the one that Edgar Cayce put out there, which was quite interesting. But there's a beautiful book, and I would wonder what Jesus would say about it, but it was Edgar Cayce's readings on Jesus.
Oh, I'd like to read that.
It was, but I don't even know if it's in print anymore. It was written, it wasn't written. All of the Cayce readings were dictated in trance, and all the information was compiled. So people who, they more edit than they write. They go in and they put their own spin on sometimes on things, but they quote the Cayce readings, and that this one does it more extensively than most others. But it's Jeffrey First, F-U-R-S-T, and the ARE may have a copy of it floating around somewhere. But it's Edgar Cayce's story on Jesus, and it covers the whole gamut. It's fascinating and talks about a little bit, which leads you off into some other books on the cosmology of why this whole process was created. But that's another story. Let's do another sentence before we take a quick break for announcements.
Okay, and so the next sentence, again, is no ego, because you're saying, endow me with the wisdom to produce and share what each being needs to grow and flourish.
And that means the same thing. It's love.
Yeah.
As the Beatles once said, all we need is love. So that's what we need to grow and flourish, is the love that basically gives us the space to be and do and become.
Right. And so, I know as an ego person that's evolving out of an ego, I understand the ego. And so it's based on duality. So it's like the ego always wants to be right because it doesn't want to be wrong, and that's why some people really like to argue so they can be right or prove their point. And then it also believes in better and worse, and everybody wants to be better. It believes in winning and losing. Everybody wants to be a winner. And so it's all this, forgiveness. I mean, it's about sin and punishment and all of those things that are not in the mind of God. They're not love. And so, as you come out, so if you find yourself wanting to, be right in the situation, you say, endow me with the understanding, the wisdom to produce and share what each being needs to grow and flourish. So I get out of the way again.
And one of the things, I don't remember where I was given this little bit of information, but it was long ago and far away, that when we're asking or trying to determine what's guiding us, if it speaks in I, it's ego. If it speaks in us and we, it's spirit.
Oh, nice, yeah.
And that's what I see in here,
Right.
that, endow me with the wisdom to produce and share what each being needs to grow and flourish. It's us.
Yeah. And you do that with your show.
God put me here for a purpose, and maybe
Right.
the show's part of it. We've got about 9 minutes left, so before we finish up with the last few sentences, and maybe we'll just zip through those, and I'll try to keep quiet.
Okay.
You got any announcements you want to make?
I do. I have a website called HTTP, Reprogramming the Unconscious Mind, and I do local classes. I'm teaching the sacred yoga Jesus taught on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. at the Center for Spiritual Living here in Santa Fe. And this weekend I am also presenting a workshop on the science of embodying and embracing, which is kind of what we're talking about, but really getting into how do I embrace the truth? How do I embody it so that I may live it? So that's this weekend coming up.
And they can contact you and find out all the particulars, time, place, if there's a fee or not, what they need to know and not know.
Yeah, so it's on my website, or you can email me at Virginia Ellen, ELLEN, @gmail.com.
Or we've also flashed, I think, a phone number for you so they can call you. So yeah, just reach out and you'll be happy to give them everything they need to know.
I will.
Excellent. I just want to make a couple of quick announcements, then we'll finish up with the last 3 lines of this prayer. Number 1, this is public access television that you are watching. You are the public. Without you, there is no show. We'd just be sitting here talking to one another, and all this wonderful information would just be rolled up in some electronic zeros and ones. It's because you're out there that this is all happening. Want to hear from you, love to hear from you. Questions, shows you'd like topics to be addressed on. Maybe you want to do a show with me. You wouldn't be the first and hopefully not the last to say, I know something about something. I'd like to do a show with you on it. So I'd love to hear from you. My contact information is flashing on the screen. Also, I am a spiritual counselor. I have a state license, but I really work with spirit as opposed to the thoughts and feelings which are we talk about reflection of ego. Ego doesn't heal. Ego clouds the picture and gets us distracted from where the real truth is. So if you think that spiritual counseling can be of any help to you, feel free to contact me. I do not try to convert you. I do not try to change how you believe. That's not my job. What Virginia said a little bit earlier, there's lots of different ways for that, to get to the one same place, and God is big enough for all of them. So reach out. Don't worry about finances. I work on a donation basis. If money's tight, don't worry about it. God takes care of me. You don't have to. So we got about 5-6 minutes left. You want to do the... And yes. I'll try to keep quiet so I don't interfere.
Okay, so the next sentence is what we call forgiveness. And it's untie the tangled threads that bind me to the past. So when we're in blame or upset, we are tied up in tangled threads that bind us to the past. And I really like that description of forgiveness. As I release others from the entanglement of past mistakes.
And that just ties right back into that, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Yes.
So that's what that was. And then the next sentence I feel is very, very powerful too. Do not let me be seduced by that which would divert me from my true purpose. So I could be seduced by some of my thoughts or by maybe an addiction. So I let things seduce me. So do not let me be seduced by that which would divert me from my true purpose, but illuminate the opportunity of the present moment.
The opportunity of the present moment is a choice. Am I listening to spirit? Am I listening to self?
Yeah, and illuminate it is bring the light
Show
to
me,
the situation.
shed the light on it, exactly.
And then the last sentence, which you read earlier, for you are the ground and the fruitful vision, the birth and fulfillment, as all is gathered and made whole once again.
So when we recognize the oneness, we're made whole.
Yes.
And the more that we practice the oneness, the more one we become.
Yeah, and as the ego begins to awaken and realize itself, then that's gathering all of the parts of me that are returning to wholeness. Because that's what the Beatitudes are about, is gathering the inner community of voices and return them to wholeness, return them to love.
I did a radio show, might have been a decade ago, not on the Lord's Prayer because I didn't have enough time on air to do that, but I did a take on the Beatitudes. And there were 2 books I used that are not quite as powerfully stated as this, but they get there. One was Emmett Fox.
Oh, I know of him, yes.
And the other one was Swami Prahavananda. Took a Vedic look at Jesus' teachings in the Beatitudes and kind of paralleled them to the teachings of Vedic tradition. And amazing stuff. And it might even be on my website. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, that early conversation we had earlier in the show. I mean, there's so many great teachings here.
Right. So what I'd like to do is run through this whole thing and have people in the audience close their eyes so they can feel, and I'll say the words and you repeat them after me. O cosmic birther of all radiance and all vibration, soften the ground of my being. Hollow out a space within me for your presence to abide. Bring me a new vision, a new way, so that I may be empowered to bear the fruit of your love. I get out of the way, and I let my actions bear fruit in accordance to your desire and will. Endow me with the wisdom to produce and share what each being needs to grow and flourish. Untie the tangled threads that bind me to the past as I release others from the entanglement of past mistakes. Do not let me be seduced excuse me, by that which would divert me from my true purpose, but illuminate the opportunity of the present moment. For you are the ground and the fruitful vision, the birth and fulfillment, and all is gathered and made whole once again.
And that is beautiful. We're rapidly running out of time. I just want to, when you're reading that in the whole thing at once, divert me, you know, that which would divert me from my true purpose. What's my true purpose? Being made whole once again.
Yes.
And that's what ego does. And that's what we're here to be on the lookout for. Marvelous.
Yeah, so it's a good prayer.
It's a marvelous prayer.
It's amazing. It's amazing, actually. It really can shift and change you.
And this prayer is on your website?
Yes,
So people can access the website you gave them, or contact me if you need the contact information for Virginia, and they can access this and use it for their own, reading it over and over again and do the things.
Right, and then also I wanted to mention real quick, I do healing work. It's called the Medicine of Love. And so that's also available if you are interested.
Okay. I thank you so much. It has been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
I want to thank you all for tuning in. The message is the same. We can be made whole once again, because the only thing that is separate about us is us believing we're separate. We are not separate. We are whole. So until next week, love and light, blessings to you all. I'm Reverend Phil, and I've been your host for Words of the Prophets. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me again next week, same time, same channel, for more Words of the Prophets.